Have you ever been erased while standing right there? The day my daughter got married, I didn't get a seat. I got a link. No mom, no invitation. Just a subject line and a live stream, like a polite way to say, stay home. I sat in the kitchen, coffee gone cold, staring at a screen that didn't blink back. No dress preview. No thank you for the 50,000. Just LOL. You'll see everything just fine. And I did. I saw every detail, not of the wedding, but of the rewrite. My name, missing from the guest list. My money, rerouted to a woman who once called me the other side of the family. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just watched the rain slide down the window and reached for the folder. They thought silence meant surrender. They forgot silence is where signatures live. If any part of that felt familiar, you're not alone. Feel free to like, subscribe, or just leave a note. Your voice matters here. Stories like these don't shout, but they echo in quiet hearts. Let me take you back to the moment everything shifted. It wasn't an invitation. It was a link. That was the first thing I saw. No "Dear Mom," no warm greeting, just a cold subject line from Emily and a hyperlink staring back at me like a digital slap across the face. The header read, "For you to view the ceremony." I had just poured my morning coffee, the kind I only make when the house is still, before the neighbors start their leaf blowers, before the sun climbs too high. It was early spring in Oregon, and light slanted through the east window, casting long, golden shadows across the breakfast table. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I took one slow sip, savoring the heat, then opened my laptop. The ding of a new email felt innocent enough. I smiled when I saw her name. For a moment, I let myself believe it was a thank you. Maybe a sweet update about the venue or the flowers I helped pay for. Maybe she'd sent me a sneak peek of her dress, the one I never got to see. But then I clicked. It wasn't a photo. It wasn't a note. It was a Google Meet link, one line above it. "Hey Mom, we finalized the guest list. Andrew's family wanted to keep it small and intimate, so we'll be live streaming the ceremony for a few people. You'll be able to see everything just fine. LOL." That last part, LOL, landed like a hammer. Not because it was cruel, but because it was casual, as if all the years I held her hand through scraped knees and broken hearts had earned me. A hyperlink and a laugh. I don't remember blinking. I just remember the way my hand froze on the trackpad, the way the steam from my coffee curled upward like a ghost, slowly fading into nothing. No mention of the $30,000 I'd already wired. No mention of me being part of the day. No mention of me at all, just a link. I sat there blinking at the screen like the message might change if I stared long enough. I waited for my heart to twist, for my hands to shake, for the tears to come. They didn't. What came instead was a silence I couldn't explain. Not the kind that's peaceful, not the kind that wraps you in stillness. No, this was the kind of silence that follows a car crash, sharp, cold, disorienting. I didn't reply right away. I closed the lid of my laptop with slow, deliberate fingers. The weight of it felt heavier than it had that morning. My coffee had gone cold. I drank it anyway. I wish I could say I cried or screamed or called her. But what I did was simpler. I sat there, staring out the kitchen window at the maple tree in our backyard, bare branches just beginning to sprout green. I thought about how many times I'd stood under that tree during summers past, watching Emily and Luke chase each other with water balloons, their laughter echoing across the lawn. And now I was being told to watch from the outside, like a stranger, like a spectator. It wasn't the first time I'd been overlooked, but it was the first time I saw it for what it really was, a decision. And maybe, just maybe, this time, I'd make one of my own. Funny how the fine print always hides what matters most. It was nearly midnight when I opened the folder. I hadn't planned on revisiting the wire transfer, not that night, not in that state. But something about the link, That cold, detached digital door slammed in my face left me needing to see something tangible, something I could hold or control. The house had settled into that late-night hush where even the walls seemed to exhale. Outside my window, Oregon rain whispered against the panes. I sat on the edge of my bed, robe loosely knotted, laptop perched on my knees, casting pale blue light across the room. I typed slowly, deliberately, logged into the banking portal, searched for the pending transfer. Venue final installment, Napa Valley. It was still there. $50,000. Status. Processing. I clicked through the tabs, scanning for confirmation details. Then I saw it. A line tucked beneath the payment routing. Recipient, Caroline Langford. I blinked. Refreshed the page. Still there. Not Emily Collins, not Emily and Andrew. Just Caroline Langford, Andrew's mother, the woman I'd only met twice. Once at an overpriced brunch where she corrected the waiter's pronunciation of croque madame, and once on a scratchy phone call where she referred to me as the other side of the family. She was the recipient of $50,000 from my account. My cursor hovered over the line like it might erase itself. It didn't. I opened the original contract I'd signed 3 weeks earlier. Pulled from my downloads, the PDF bloomed on the screen. Page 2, bottom left corner, authorized by Margaret Collins, in black. But below that, stamped in red, freshly added in a more recent version I didn't remember agreeing to. Recipient update. Caroline Langford, co-payee, as agreed by family. Next to it, in small, almost smug script, authorized. I stared at the word. Not capitalized out of necessity. Capitalized like a dare. I scrolled through the metadata of the file. Emily's email was there, time-stamped from a week ago. She had re-uploaded the form, replacing my original agreement with this version. I wasn't just cut out of the wedding. I was rerouted. Replaced. Like I was only useful until the check cleared. Like I was a middleman, a human ATM with a soft smile and poor boundaries. There's a particular kind of nausea that doesn't start in the stomach. It starts in the soul. That was what rose in me then. Not fury, not grief, but a slow, sick churn of realization. This wasn't just about being uninvited. This was about being rewritten. I leaned back in my chair, screen still glowing against the dark. The shadows on the ceiling stretched longer now. Outside, the rain turned to a heavier rhythm, as if the sky had finally decided to weep for me. But I didn't cry. I just sat there, watching my name on the bottom of that form, stamped next to a word I hadn't consented to. Authorized. It was supposed to mean power, agreement, consent. But tonight, it felt more like a signature on my own erasure, and somewhere deep inside, past the numbness, past the ache, a new word began to form. Not forgive, not fight, something colder, something quieter, something final. I didn't go looking for truth. It found me anyway. It was Friday morning when Linda called. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, not since her retirement party at the firm, where I stood at the edge of the room holding a paper cup of champagne and pretending I wasn't already halfway invisible to the next generation. But she always had a sharp eye for detail and a memory like a steel trap, which made her a damn good accountant and an even better judge of people. "Coffee?" she asked. "I'll be near your office. Just 30 minutes. There was something in her voice, measured, almost cautious. I said yes without asking why. We met at Finch and Pine, the quiet little cafe tucked behind the courthouse, where old lawyers nursed bitterness and espresso in equal parts. She was already seated by the time I arrived, hair still clipped back in that tight silver twist, glasses perched low on her nose. On the table in front of her sat 2 tiny cups of espresso and a manila folder, worn at the edges. "I saw your name pop up," she said, cutting to it. "Wire to a Napa venue. Listed payee. Caroline Langford." I nodded. Yes, Emily's future mother-in-law. They're planning the wedding. Linda didn't answer right away. She just reached into the folder and slid a document across the table, then another, and finally a third, a photocopy of a black and white court docket with a grainy still from a Zoom hearing. I didn't need to read the names to recognize the outline of Andrew's profile. The words were faded but clear enough: misappropriation, breach of contract, civil fraud. 2 years ago, Linda said quietly. Different bride, same family, different bank account. She sipped her espresso without sugar, without apology. They moved the money, deposits intended for venue, dress, catering, redirected to a family trust Caroline manages. When the bride's father asked questions, Caroline called off the wedding, claimed irreconcilable stress. The girl never saw a dime back. I stared at the documents. The pages didn't shake in my hands. My breath didn't quicken, but something cold crept in under my skin, like frost silently blooming behind my ribs. She's careful, Linda went on. Never enough to trigger jail time, but enough to disappear into silence. She leaned in slightly, her voice gentler now. Margaret, they've done this before, and they're doing it again. With your name, your money. I didn't speak, couldn't. My gaze drifted to the photo. Andrew, half blurred, jaw set tight. He looked younger, but the posture was the same, entitled, closed, unaware of the damage trailing behind him like oil in water. The espresso sat untouched in front of me, steam curled into nothing. I folded the folder shut with slow hands and placed it neatly in my purse, as if it were nothing more than tax forms or a grocery list. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Linda's eyes softened. Because we don't always know what we're signing until the pen's already down, and because you're not the kind of woman who deserves to be erased without even knowing the ink was wet. I nodded. Once, firmly. Outside, the rain had started again, gentle and rhythmic. I watched it trail down the window in thin lines, blurring the world beyond the glass. The sounds of the cafe faded, the clinking of spoons, the hum of conversation, until all that was left was my breath and the sudden clarity of a puzzle beginning to fit together. No rage, no panic, just understanding, and a quiet rising resolve. They'd written me out of the story, but I still had the receipts. I didn't mean to overhear them, but maybe I was meant to. It was a Wednesday evening. I remember because the rain had stopped just long enough for the air to feel like bruised velvet, soft but heavy. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a small glass of the red I usually saved for Thanksgiving, the kind that tastes like thyme, dry, dark, a little bitter. The house was dim, lit only by the hallway lamp that cast a warm amber glow across the floorboards. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just tired in a way that no sleep could fix. The call came through on Luke's phone. He'd stopped by unannounced, something he hadn't done in years, said he wanted to check in, but he didn't even take off his coat. We stood in awkward silence in the kitchen, and when his phone rang, he gestured toward the living room and said, "One sec, it's Em." Then he stepped away. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. Voices carry in old houses, and what I heard didn't come in angry bursts. It came in the kind of measured tones people use when they think they're the smartest ones in the room. "If she backs out," Emily said, "we just say she changed her mind, that she's unstable, stressed. She always gets emotional, so it'll make sense." Luke murmured something I couldn't hear. Then, "She won't back out. She's too proud. She won't risk making a scene." Emily again, sharper this time. "Good. Because if the venue doesn't get that payment by Friday, everything collapses. Andrew's parents will kill me. Just make sure she sends the wire." And then the sound that followed. The one that didn't come from the phone, the one that came from me. The wine glass slipped from my hand. It hit the floor and exploded, thin crystal shattering like ice underfoot, red spreading fast across the wood like spilled blood. Luke rushed back into the kitchen. His eyes widened when he saw the mess. "Mom, are you okay?" I didn't answer. I was staring at the stain seeping between the boards, the splinters of glass catching the hallway light like little knives. I could still hear her voice in my head. "We just say she changed her mind." I bent down slowly, gathered a few shards in my palm, careful not to bleed. "Not yet." "Don't," I said, calm, too calm. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "You don't need to explain anything." He stood frozen. Confused, maybe, but I wasn't, because in that moment, everything shifted. There was no more illusion, no buffer of hope, no more justifying her behavior with tired excuses like she's stressed, she's overwhelmed, she's just trying to make it perfect. This wasn't about the wedding. This wasn't even about money. This was about convenience. I was convenient until I wasn't, useful until I became an obstacle. I rose, straightened my spine. Luke was still talking. Something about how I misheard, how Emily was under pressure, but I wasn't listening anymore. Because something had settled in me. Not grief, not rage, just clarity. I walked past him, barefoot on the floor, still sticky with wine, and left the mess behind me. Let it stain. Let it sit. Some truths deserve to be permanent. If I was just a line on a form, I could be erased too. I walked into the bank that Friday morning with my coat still damp from the drizzle outside. The air smelled like paper and lemon disinfectant, clean, cold, impersonal. I had my purse in one hand, my gloves in the other, and a decision sitting heavy on my chest like a stone I'd been polishing for years without realizing. Carlos looked up from his desk the moment I stepped in. He smiled, kind, practiced, familiar. We'd known each other for over a decade. He'd helped me set up Emily's college fund. He'd watched Luke's first mortgage close. He'd once slipped me a tissue when I signed the final paperwork after Tom died. "Mrs. Collins," he greeted, standing. Come in, come in. What can I help you with today?" I sat slowly, placing my bag on the floor with more care than I felt. I didn't smile. My voice, when it came, was quiet but unmistakable. "I need to cancel a transfer. $50,000. It's still pending." Carlos blinked, his fingers hesitating above the keyboard. "To Napa Valley, yes?" "For the wedding?" "Yes," I said. He paused. "May I ask?" "No," I said gently. "You may not." He held my gaze for a second longer than usual, then nodded. "Understood." His fingers moved quickly, tapping through screens I couldn't see. I watched the reflection of the monitor in the glass behind him, lines of numbers scrolling past like a language I no longer needed to speak. "There may be a reversal fee, depending on timing," he said, "but looks like you're just in time. Funds haven't posted yet." I exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Good." He pulled up a digital form, swiveled the screen toward me, and slid a stylus across the desk. "You'll need to sign here and here." My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the pen, not from doubt, not from nerves, but from the accumulation of things finally leaving my body, the weight of years spent saying yes without being asked, the exhaustion of being useful but never essential. I signed my name with care, crossing every T, curling every letter like it meant something. And then he reached into a drawer, took out the physical ledger they still used for high-value cancellations, and stamped it. Firm, centered, final, canceled. Red ink bled across the page in thick block letters, like a verdict delivered by someone who wasn't afraid to be clear. I stared at it for a long time. Not out of hesitation, but reverence. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't asking anyone for permission to choose myself. Carlos looked up again, his voice quieter. "Anything else I can help you with?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to update account access for the education fund I set up years ago, the one in Emily's name." He opened another screen. "To what?" "Remove her," I said. "Transfer full control back to me." He didn't flinch, just nodded. "Understood." I signed again, and this time my hand was steady. Outside, the sky had cleared just enough to let a shaft of light spill through the clouds. I stepped out into it like stepping onto a new stage, one where I wasn't the background or the supporting cast or the checkbook waiting in the wings. I was no longer a line on someone else's story. I was holding the pen now. They called it sabotage. I called it clarity. The voicemail started before sunrise. Emily's voice cracked with urgency. Andrew's tone was colder, controlled, clipped, the way someone sounds when they're trying not to scream through a clenched jaw. By mid-morning, there were 8 missed calls, 3 texts from a number I didn't recognize, and 1 curt message from Caroline Langford. I expected more from a woman your age. There will be consequences. I didn't reply. The sun was low by the time Luke pulled into the driveway. I watched from the living room window as he sat in his car for a full minute before getting out, as if rehearsing whatever line he thought would win me over. He didn't knock, just walked in like he still had a key to the past. "Mom," he said, already defensive, "what the hell is going on?" I didn't look at him right away. I was sitting on the couch, legs folded, the house dimly lit by the same lamp that had been there since before Tom passed. The bottle of wine from last Thanksgiving sat unopened on the table. Dust traced the glass like it had been waiting for this moment. "They're saying you pulled the payment," he pressed, "that the venue's threatening to cancel, that you're blowing everything up because your name wasn't—" He stopped himself. Too late. I turned my head slowly. "Because my name wasn't what?" He shifted, suddenly unsure. "Because it wasn't listed the way you wanted." I stood. Not quickly, not dramatically, just deliberately. "You mean because it wasn't listed at all?" He hesitated. I watched him falter, just enough to know the truth had been living in his mouth all along. "It wasn't my decision," he said quietly. "That's not what I asked." He looked down. That's when I reached into the side table drawer and pulled out the copy I'd printed. Emily's wedding layout sent months ago in a shared folder I wasn't supposed to access. Color-coded, table numbers, names neatly typed out in faux calligraphy. I unfolded the paper and held it up to him. "Find me." He didn't. He couldn't. Not even in the overflow list. Not even at the back. My name wasn't there. They had never intended to include me. Not really, not from the beginning. I placed the paper on the table next to the wine. The contrast between the pristine bottle and the ghost of my absence on that guest list felt poetic in a way I didn't need to explain. "I gave everything to this family," I said. "I bought dresses I never wore, paid deposits for meals I wasn't invited to, and held hands through heartbreaks that weren't mine to carry. And now I'm an afterthought with a price tag." Luke's mouth opened, but I didn't let him speak. I walked calmly to the front door, opened it wide, and turned back to him. "Out." "Mom, come on." "Out," I repeated, quieter this time. "Before I forget that I still love you." He looked at me like he didn't recognize what he saw anymore. Maybe he didn't. Maybe that was the point. He stepped outside. The air had cooled. Leaves skittered across the porch like they were running too. I closed the door behind him. Not with force, not with anger, just with finality. And for the first time, the silence in the house didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like the sound of a throne being reclaimed. She wasn't there to change my mind. She came to understand it. It was nearly dusk when the knock came. 3 quick taps, light, like someone unsure if they should even be at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most people had learned by now to call first, or not at all. I opened it to find Sophia standing there, clutching a manila folder tight against her chest, like it might blow away if she let go. Her coat was damp at the shoulders, and her hair, still pulled into the same lazy braid I remembered from sleepovers long ago, was frizzing at the ends. "Hi, Mrs. Collins," she said, voice soft. "Do you have a minute?" I didn't ask who sent her. I already knew. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. The kitchen still smelled faintly of chamomile and lemon, remnants from the tea I'd made the night before, but never drank. The kettle clicked as I turned it on again, out of habit more than hospitality. Sophia sat at the table, her eyes scanning the room like she was seeing it through 2 decades of memory. I could almost hear the echoes of their childhood in her silence. Emily's laughter, the clatter of cookie trays, the whisper of secrets past bedtime. "I'm not here to talk you into anything," she said finally, placing the folder on the table. "I just thought you should see this." I waited. I didn't reach for it. She opened her laptop instead, turned the screen toward me, and clicked through to a folder titled Emily Wedding, Drafts. Inside were subfolders, Layout, Florals, Guest List. She opened the last one. There it was, Guest List V1 with mom.pdf timestamped, dated 6 weeks prior. My name, right there beside Table 3, Family of the Bride. Highlighted. Sophia hesitated before clicking the next file. Guest list, Sinim Final Sotel Langford Approved.pdf. My name was gone. So were 2 of Emily's college friends and one of her cousins from Chicago. "She cried after that dinner with Carolyn," Sophia said. "Said she didn't want to fight. Said she'd make it up to you later, but I think she thought there would always be time." I looked at the screen, then at the girl sitting across from me, the girl who used to call me her second mom. Her eyes were red around the edges, like she hadn't slept either. "She's not a bad person," she added almost apologetically. "She's just under pressure." I nodded once. Then, after a long silence, I said, "Kombe Kong Shao, no Chio." "She's not bad. She's just weak." Sophia didn't respond. She didn't need to. The kettle whined, then clicked off. I poured us both tea, slid a mug in front of her. She cupped it in her hands like it was something sacred. "I'm sorry she hurt you," she said, not looking at me. "I'm sorry she let herself be erased," I replied. We sat in that silence, soft and unsentimental. No one begged for forgiveness. No one asked for a second chance. We just let the truth breathe for a while. Sophia stayed a little longer, told me about grad school, about how her own mother was aging, about how she sometimes caught herself sounding just like her. Before she left, she looked at me with something fragile in her expression. Respect, maybe, or regret. I walked her to the door. The wind had picked up. The last of the magnolia petals were scattering across the porch like forgotten invitations. She turned back once before stepping into the night. "I think she'll regret this forever," she said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some regrets belong to the people who choose them. I didn't crash the wedding. I just delivered the truth. I woke that morning to birdsong and silence, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm, but not the kind that howls and shatters windows. This one would arrive quietly. Paper, not thunder, ink, not lightning. The dress I wore was plain, gray wool, no makeup, no perfume, just me, carrying a small gold envelope sealed in red wax, heavy in my coat pocket like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me anymore. The venue was 20 miles outside town, nestled among vineyards that hadn't yet bloomed. I parked 2 lots away, walked slow, watched from the slope above as white tents rose like cathedral spires. Staff wheeled out trays of shrimp cocktails. Someone tested the mic. 1, 2, 1, 2. Somewhere inside, a violinist tuned her strings, while mothers adjusted corsages and photographers adjusted expectations. I didn't look toward the bride's room. The receptionist behind the glass counter looked up when I stepped in. Young, flushed, her clipboard clutched like a shield. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I placed the envelope gently on the counter. The seal shimmered crimson under the overhead light. "This is for the manager," I said. "It's time sensitive. Please make sure it gets to the right hands." She blinked. "Should I tell them who it's from?" I smiled. Not kindly, not coldly. Just done. Number they'll know. Then I turned. Walked out without looking back. I didn't stay to see the moment it was opened. Didn't hear the way voices changed when contracts unravel. But I know how it would have felt, like glass cracking beneath silk. Inside that envelope, a certified copy of the bank transfer authorization form with the name Caroline Langford inked in bold where my daughter's name should have been, a printed email from Andrew bragging about outsourcing the funding to avoid tax reporting, a clause from the venue's own agreement buried in legalese, clearly stating that knowingly using falsified financial information could result in immediate cancellation. They hadn't read the fine print, but I had. By noon, the string quartet had packed up. By 1, the vendors were wheeling out the cakes they hadn't served. I imagine there were whispers, red-faced arguments, someone screaming into a phone, Caroline throwing blame like rice. Emily, maybe in tears, maybe not. I wouldn't know. I wasn't there. But I saw the news online later that evening. Wedding at Evergreen Estate abruptly canceled due to contract violation. Anonymous sources. No names. Just a single photo. The gates locked. A private event closed sign crooked on its hinges. I didn't smile. It wasn't about smiling. It was about balance. There's a quiet kind of justice that doesn't ask for an audience, just a well-timed envelope, just a sealed truth. I poured myself a glass of wine that night, the same bottle from last Thanksgiving, untouched until now. I sipped it slowly, watching the dusk fold over the trees like a curtain. They called it sabotage. I called it clarity. She called crying. I didn't answer in anger, I just didn't answer. The phone buzzed twice beside me before it went still again. I didn't check who it was. I didn't need to. The silence afterward was heavier than the ring. The porch was quiet that afternoon, the way only late autumn knows how to be. Sunlight slanting low through the maple tree, painting the boards in gold and rust. A breeze nudged the wind chimes above me, their sound barely more than a whisper now. I turned the page of the novel in my lap, though I hadn't really been reading. My thumb ran along the edge of the paper, but my eyes were elsewhere, on the tree in the front yard. That old maple had stood longer than this house. Its leaves were starting to let go, one by one, dancing down like they knew it wasn't their fault the seasons had changed. The phone lit up again. Emily. This time, she didn't call. Just a voicemail. And then, a minute later, another. A voice memo. I could already imagine her words, too fast, too breathy, half apology, half defense, words trying to patch over rot. Weeks ago, those sounds would have torn me in two. Now they barely stirred the dust. She had cried, yes, but not when I was erased, not when my name was crossed off like a typo, not when she let a stranger, no, worse, a manipulator, decide who her mother was allowed to be. She cried now when the house of cards had collapsed and the cameras were gone, and all she had left was the echo of my absence. I didn't hate her. That would have been easier. Hate gives you a place to put your pain. But this was different. It was the soft closing of a door that had been left open too long. It was peace, uncomfortable, and necessary. My hand hovered over the phone, then moved away. I turned it face down. I took a slow sip from my tea, now lukewarm, and watched a single red leaf fall from the maple. It spiraled down, unhurried, final, and beautiful in its own way. People think silence is cold, but they're wrong. It's not punishment. It's not rage. It's just the only thing left when words have failed, when the giving has gone too long in one direction, when love has been confused for leverage. That was always the tragedy. She thought I was a resource, not a mother. I leaned back in the chair. The sun had started to dip below the neighbor's fence, casting long shadows across the porch. Another message came in. I didn't move. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I just wasn't available. Because love, real love, doesn't beg to be chosen. And I had finally chosen myself. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for someone to call me mom. I was sitting at a pottery wheel with clay under my fingernails and a streak of something soft and gray across my cheek. The piece in front of me had cracked. Right down the middle, thin, almost graceful, like a line of age on a face that had seen things and stayed standing. The instructor offered to help me remake it. I smiled, shook my head, and said, "No, I think I'll keep it." There was something honest about that fracture, something truer than any smooth, symmetrical bowl I could have made. It was mine, and it hadn't broken me. Thursday nights became my favorite ritual: clay and tea, laughter with women I'd never known but somehow felt I'd always belonged with. There was a widow who made garden gnomes, a teacher who couldn't center her pieces if her life depended on it, and a retired nurse who sang while she spun. We didn't talk about our pasts much, just the shape of things to come. Friday evenings were for dinner, not the kind I used to cook for a family who rarely noticed the effort, but small, intimate plates with friends who poured wine and actually listened. The kind of meals where no one kept their phones on the table, where silence wasn't awkward, just full. One night, I brought up the idea of a scholarship. "For who?" someone asked. I said, "For women who stayed too long in places they weren't seen." They all went quiet. Then they nodded. I didn't name it after my daughter. I didn't name it after my late husband. I named it after the woman who got herself out. Margaret's Fund, for women who choose themselves. The nameplate went up at the local library 2 months later, right above the donation box. I touched it once, not out of pride, but reverence. It didn't erase anything, but it honored what came after. Sometimes I still get messages. Luke sent a card around Thanksgiving. It said nothing real, just a photo of him and Emily, smiling like their world hadn't cracked too. I didn't write back. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting. That chapter had ended not with a slamming door, but with a woman stepping off stage, quietly, finally. One morning, as I opened the windows to let in the spring air, I realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking of them, without rehearsing old conversations or retracing wounds to prove they were real. I was alive in a way I hadn't been since before I became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's fixer. Now I was just Margaret, and that was more than enough. I passed the cracked bowl in the hallway on my way out. It sat on a shelf with no function but to exist, flawed and permanent. I smiled, and this time, I didn't whisper. I didn't scream. I just walked away. And the silence said everything. Some doors don't slam shut. They simply drift closed. Over years, over dinners, over unanswered calls. You don't always notice the moment you go from mother to margin, not until your name disappears from the list. And no one thinks to add it back. Silence can feel like safety at first, like choosing peace, like being the bigger person. But silence, too long, becomes a kind of erasure, not just from their story, but from your own. There's a sorrow in realizing the people you loved most, loved the version of you that didn't ask for anything. But there is grace in the undoing, in saying no more, without bitterness, without noise. Some of us don't reclaim ourselves through rage. We do it with a signature, with a quiet step forward, with a chair that stays empty, not out of protest, but because we finally walked away. And when the phone rings later, when the tears come too late, we learn that not answering is also a form of love, for ourselves, for the years we have left. You don't have to be written back into their story. You only have to begin writing your own. And sometimes, the silence says everything. Thank you for being here. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll share a few words below. Your story matters too. Subscribe if you believe in quiet strength, in late blooming and healing that comes softly but stays. We don't need to raise our voices to be heard. Sometimes, we just need someone who's listening. Until next time, be gentle with yourself.